It is 6 p.m. Tuesday, the 7th of October in Tokyo, Japan, and interests in southern Japan are closely monitoring Typhoon Vongfong located well to the south. Indications are that Vongfong is approaching super typhoon status. We are in the process of losing daytime visible satellite imagery, but in the last few frames you can see that Vongfong is continuing to organize rather quickly, and the enhanced infrared imagery is even more impressive, as you can see a dark ring of intense convection wrapping around what is now becoming a well-defined eye. The latest satellite-derived intensity estimates using the Dvorak intensity technique show that the t-values are up to 5.5. However, these were taken several hours ago. Nonetheless, a 5.5 on the Dvorak scale indicates that maximum sustained winds, if we're talking about 1 minute sustained winds, are in excess of 102 knots or 117 miles per hour. But once again, over the last few hours, as you can see on the most recent satellite animations, Vongfong has become much more better defined since then, and it is very likely that the actual intensity is much higher already. As a matter of fact, in the process of making this video, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center has issued warning number 19, and they have increased their initialized intensity from 100 knots in the previous warning to 120 knots, which is making this a near super typhoon, and in fact they are forecasting Vongfong to become a super typhoon within the next 24 to 48 hours with a maximum intensity of 135 knots. And as you can see, the forecast track does not bode well for the southernmost islands of Japan, including Okinawa, as they are showing a gradual bend toward the north, followed by yet another bend back towards the northwest before the system more than likely takes a turn toward the northeast towards the mainland of Japan. Additionally, we are seeing very good agreement between the JTWC track and the official forecast from the Japan Meteorological Agency. Essentially, the track is no different, with a turn toward the north followed by a secondary bend towards the northwest into Okinawa and Kyushu. Before elaborating about the future track of Vongfong, this is another quick look at a more enhanced or more zoomed in image of the typhoon. And it should be noted, based on the most recent animation, it looks as though even the JTWC initial intensity may be a little on the conservative side. I would place the current intensity a little closer to super typhoon status, given that the eye is becoming better defined, less cloud-filled, and there is virtually no restriction of the outflow channels. You see both north and south of the center of circulation, these cloud tops are fanning away from the center, which is a good indication that this storm is very healthy and it is not being restricted by any type of vertical wind shear. Also, as noted earlier in the video, you see a very strong or dark ring of convection. This is a sign of very cold cloud tops and very strong thunderstorms wrapping around the center. And the more you see these darker shades on the enhanced infrared fully wrapping around the eye, you know that we still have a developing or intensifying typhoon. And water vapor imagery shows no shortage of moisture. There is very little in the way of dry air entrainment into the center at this time. As we take more of a look at the regional scale once again using water vapor imagery, we can learn quite a lot about what is going on. First and foremost, as noted just a second ago, we have a very favorable outflow environment. You can see that the outflow has virtually no restriction whatsoever, with the southernmost equatorward outflow channel extending nearly to the southern Philippines. Now, towards the north, there is a little bit of a restriction here in the northeast quadrant. There is an upper level low spinning somewhat close to the typhoon, certainly not close enough to really cause any weakening of the sort. And as we also advance into the next 24 to 48 hours, we expect this upper low to gradually pull away from the storm, and that is why the JTWC is forecasting additional intensification over the next 1 to 2 days. More importantly, we can also see some of the steering mechanisms that are going to be a major factor in the track of the storm over the next 5 days. First off, you see that we have a powerful mid to upper level ridge, as you can see noted by the anticyclonic flow or the clockwise flow here over much of the Northwest Pacific. The storm is currently rounding the western periphery of this ridge. So as we saw on the more zoomed in imagery, the storm is moving a little bit more so toward the west over the past 24 hours, but we are expecting a gradual bend to the northwest and north as it rounds the western edge of this ridge, and the storm begins to feel more in the way of the effects of strong westerly flow aloft here, as you see coming out of China and southern Japan. However, as we go into 72, 96, and 120 hours, so within 3 to 5 days, this ridge is expected to temporarily build back towards the west and north, and that is why we are seeing a bit of a bend to the northwest in the latest tracks from the JTWC and the JMA. We have now switched over to the ECMWF forecast model output. The European model is usually by far the best forecast model for tropical cyclone tracks. That's not to say that the model can be incorrect and other models can outperform it at times, but it is still a good model to go by. And we are looking at not only the storm, which you can see right here, but also those main steering factors that we just talked about on the water vapor imagery. This is the overall view of the mid-level steering ridge, and you can pretty much say that the westerly winds are located from southwest to northeast here out across the South China Sea and eastern Japan. Now, as we go ahead and move forward into time here over the next 24 and 48 hours, notice that the ridge has weakened. It has shifted more so towards the east. The typhoon is now moving almost due north, and it's about to move into this westerly flow, which would usually induce a turn more so towards the northeast. However, as you see, the steering currents are fairly weak through 72 hours. You don't really see a well dug out trough or a deepening trough across this area. Instead, the mid-latitude westerlies are still mainly confined well to the north of the typhoon. And suddenly by days 4 and 5, notice what happens with the ridge to the east. The ridge has a tendency to want to build back toward the west and north, and all of a sudden we see that northwest progression with Typhoon Vongfong moving closer towards southern Japan. And between Sunday and Monday here, we're seeing a direct landfall within Kyushu. And it's really not until we go into day 7 that the storm makes a hard right turn toward the northeast. And at this point, the storm is heavily sheared. It's going to significantly weaken as it crosses the Japanese mainland. Now, that's not to diminish the impacts across Tokyo and areas along the east coast of Japan. We're still more than likely going to be dealing with at least a tropical storm or minimal typhoon at this point. But the real emphasis in today's video, at least, will be the impacts across the far southern islands in the days leading up to that gradual northeast recurvature. What we're looking at now is a more high-res, zoomed-in surface winds forecast view of the European model. We're looking at around 9 to 10 a.m. Saturday morning. You can see that there are already strong northeast winds beginning to impact these islands. Not quite typhoon intensity just yet, but you certainly want to have your preparations done no later than Friday based on the latest timetable. Now, as we advance further into Sunday afternoon, you can see this is really the time when the inner core is directly impacting the islands to the north, especially of Naha. Now, based on this run, Naha would be along the southern edge of the storm, the southern and western periphery. However, you still cannot discount the possibility of a direct hit. You are still well within the margin of error, and even if you were to take this run verbatim, you would still be getting fairly strong north to northwest winds. So you still want to make your preparations, but the area that looks to be at a highest risk for a direct hit, potentially severe typhoon force winds, would be the islands just to the north, including the Satsunan Islands. And even as we go into Monday morning, we cannot discount the possibility of a direct hit across the Kagoshima mainland. We're talking not only heavy rain, but the possibility of moderate to strong typhoon force sustained winds. So all interests across the part of southern Japan need to be bracing for a fairly strong typhoon impact. Now, as we talked about a little bit earlier in the video, as the storm parallels the coastline, it will not only see more in the way of southwest wind shear as it gets embedded within the mid-latitude westerly flow, it will also be interacting with much more in the way of unfavorable terrain. So we are expecting rapid weakening as the storm turns towards the northeast and east-northeast. But even then, we cannot discount the possibility of Vongfong maintaining at least minimal typhoon status, since it will be coming from more than likely super typhoon peak intensity over the next 2 to 3 days. So all in all, this is still a very high impact event for much of southern and even central Japan, and ground zero very well could potentially be the Satsunan Islands in interest near and especially just north of Naha. So it's going to be a very interesting 5 days out across the western Pacific typhoon basin. Please keep up with the Japan Meteorological Agency for the latest official updates on this dangerous typhoon. And as always, you can rely on 28storms.com/typhoon as a very good supplemental source to the official information that is out there. If you ever have any difficulty finding links to the official sources, you can check them out at 28storms.com/typhoon. You can check out additional sources, and underneath this tab, you will find the latest links to the official typhoon warning centers out across the Western Pacific. most importantly, the Japan Meteorological Agency. And if you're curious to see what the Typhoon Warning Center has to say, you can find the links to them here at the very first tab on the right-hand side of the screen. Also, in addition to exclusive videos here at 28storms.com, you can find the videos from our partners at westernpacificweather.com. They are also being embedded here onto the website. If you click on one of the more recent blog posts, you can find those links as well. So we have you covered here. Please stick to the latest updates again from the JMA and supplemental information here at 28storms.com.